This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for CrisisGo, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for CrisisGo. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Good morning, Kelly, and good morning, Jim Spicuzza.
Good morning.
So it's kind of funny. We've waited 100 episodes to get Jim on the podcast. It might be long overdue, but I didn't want to go like on the 10th episode because you never know. So yeah. We're glad to have you here.
Well, thanks. And tell you the truth, I'm really proud of you guys. The content, the stories that you've told, those things are so important that people hear it. And you've been able to do it 100 times or 99 times before me. So you're going to be really good today while I'm here.
Normally we do like an article, but I think I just want to like jump right into it so we give us enough time. So today, it's going to be a little special episode, as I'll call it. And I want to go over the history and maybe a little bit of future of CrisisGo. Kind of the brains behind Coffee with Kelly. So I guess my first question for you, Jim, is give me a little backstory. Like, what were you doing before CrisisGo?
Okay. Prior to CrisisGo, I was a partner with two other guys, and we had a school software company that did content management called School Center.
Okay.
So we were working with schools across the country, and they were learning how to make web pages in context to their school system. So initially developed so that teachers could create a web page in their class. That was really novel because you did it from a browser. You didn't have to use the older tools. And we did that. And then about 2011, we sold that business and exited as the market was really getting consolidated. And I started a small little company that just did workflow types of tools for schools. One of them was like teacher evaluation. So a tool that they could take into the class on an iPad and do teacher evaluation. And that was kind of a fun time at that time. But at that point in time, we had a guy come up to us and said, "Hey, listen, I have a customer up in the Chicagoland area that's looking to move their emergency plan from a 3-ring binder onto a mobile application. What do you think?" And I said, "Well, you work for a company that was a competitor of ours in the School Center days." I said, "Why don't they want to build it?" And he said, "I don't know, because I think it's a really great idea, but they don't want to build it. So I'm asking you." I had, prior to that, had just met our chief technology officer, and she said, "Hey, I have the way to take video and share it across different types of devices. So from a Android phone to an Apple mobile phone to a desktop computer." If you think about that, that was way before we had the ability to broadcast video.
Yeah.
It was way before. And so I said, "Well, that's a really great idea, but I don't have any kind of use case in where we're at to be able to use that." And then he brings me this idea, and I get on the phone and I call up our chief technology officer and say, "Hey, could we build this?" And she said, "Yes, let's go ahead and give it a try." And so that's where it started, from an idea to move a single emergency operations plan onto a mobile device. But before we released the first version, we added alerting and messaging because we could see that just having the plan wasn't going to be sufficient.
So that was around 2013, right?
Right.
That kind of happened?
Yep.
There was kind of a big event that happened around the same time frame, right? Was that?
Yeah. I think late 2012, but I think Sandy Hook took place.
Okay. Yeah.
So the timing seemed right. There was interest in school safety. Everybody had already just seen the real world, the implications of probably not having everything in school safety ready and working. So this was one of those first days that really set people's mindset that school safety needed to get elevated.
It's funny that the question that you pose that you say is, can we build it? And she says, yes, we can. I feel like that's probably been asked more times than you can count since then, based on all the stuff that we do now.
Sometimes it's me saying, hey, this should be simple. This sounds simple to me. And I usually get that response from Jeff. He giggles and says, yeah, it's not that easy.
To Kelly, school safety just is so simple. Come on, guys, why don't you get this?
Man. So
that was before the time in which we had Kelly to lean on, and so we did a lot of things that we had to come back and retract on. But the thing about what you said is, for every just it's common, for everything that you give somebody, they see the potential for the next best thing to go on to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what schools saw. We gave them an alert tool and a message tool. And they say, that's really great, but always a but.
Mm-hmm.
But if it could only do this too, I might buy it. And that was incentive enough for us to move on to add the next thing so we could get that customer on. Simple things like, could you make, instead of one message group, could you make multiples? Could you add a section that allowed us to have different alert types? Could you let us customize those alert types? And you can imagine, and now, Ethan, from what we experienced, it was everything and anything that people thought would make their lives easier. And that's what we tried to help our customers do.
I always consider that one of our pillars is that of just listening to our customers and building things according to what they need, instead of building something the way that we see it and just kind of pushing it on to them and saying this is how you need to do it. But I feel like there's so many features that we've had that are built based on so many customers needing it, and we just go, okay, let's build it, and then we build it. So I love that part of it.
Yeah, I think what has been amazing to me is we get some customers who have the original product.
Yeah.
And what we have today, even after I joined 5.5 years ago, it is almost a completely different, much more streamlined, much easier to use, much more comprehensive in the way that we do it. It's crazy to me how much we've evolved based upon those initial conversations that we've had with our customers, our first responders, discussions that we have internally on, it's not uncommon for me to message Jim and say, hey, you got a quick minute? And that quick minute turns into an hour and a half of, hey, how do we do this? And, so it's been fantastic, really. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it is overall it's been fantastic because of where I think we are today.
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit. So Jim, you mentioned the before Kelly, and then so I know I've heard this story, I think in a short little version from Kelly, but maybe as much as you can tell us the story of meeting Kelly and how we went about to having Kelly at CrisisGo. I think it's a good story.
Well, started out that David told me, he said, you need to talk to Kelly because we're having these great conversations. And Kelly was at a school district in Southern California at the time, working with them in school safety. He says he's got this fantastic background. Every time I talk to him, he just fills me up with ideas and things that we should be thinking about. And I said, okay, well, I'll get him on the phone. Let's have a meeting. And spent that time in that first meeting with Kelly, half an hour meeting that was 2 hours.
Yeah, I don't know if any meeting with Kelly is only half an hour.
But it opened my eyes to how little I really knew about how safety happened at a large scale, as well as I didn't really understand the thought process of how you look at safety from the eyes of a first responder and what the expectations are from people like him. So anyhow, in that meeting, it became very clear to me that, first of all, you can't take a person from your customer, right? You can't hire somebody that's a key person for your customer. It's bad optics. But over time, when Kelly left that, we wanted to make sure we had brought him on board to help me particularly, help me understand before we build products what the real world impacts are, how will they be perceived, who will push back, and then it just became a fantastic relationship where I grew in understanding school safety on a broader scale. And Kelly, you might remember completely different.
No, it's very similar.
Yeah.
It's very similar. Yeah. It's having those discussions. And I guess it was my need to expand the whole idea of school safety. I had come from a law enforcement background, as most of the listeners know or have heard several times from me. But when I got into school safety, it opened my eyes as to how connected they are to the community and how everything evolves around that and how little law enforcement was actually doing to further school safety in their own districts, the districts that they respond to. And when I looked at that relationship, I came from a unique perspective, and I was able to at least further that in my community, because when I left, this will explain it. When I left, one of my school board members came in and talked to me, and she goes, we really liked having you here. I hope you got as much out of it. And I says, I will tell you that in the two plus years that I was at the district, I did more proactive stuff for the safety of my community than I did in the entire 34 years in law enforcement. Proactive, right? So taking steps to make the community safer, because, as we've talked recently, is you can't separate the two. When you have a school, the school is the center of that community and that little neighborhood and the districts that encompass an entire city or county. That's that community. And if something happens in that community, it impacts at least one, if not multiple schools. And if you have something happen at a single school, you're impacting multiple neighborhoods within your community. And so it's crazy how connected they are. But as we've talked recently, we kind of disconnect them in school safety. We have them sitting over here and saying, okay, you guys are responsible for school safety. And then we're going to do community safety over here, and we're not going to fuse the two together. And I think that's been, something that we've evolved to, and we're solving for that problem now. But it was fantastic. Those 2 years really opened my eyes and really allowed me to continue pushing my passion in this realm on a larger scale, right? So now I'm talking to people all across the nation. It's been, a blessing for me.
And for us.
Oh, yeah. In Kelly's in Kelly's pursuit of, not retiring. A lot of people could have retired just after your experience in law enforcement, and then you continued to not retire. So thanks for not retiring.
I still continue not to retire. I don't know how much longer that's going to go, but we're still plodding away at that.
Yeah. Man. So let's see. Jim, you're talking about how you're building the alerting part of CrisisGo and like the messaging. When did when did we move on to like, I'll call it a different phase of emergency management? So when did reunification manager come into the picture? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. We kind of went through this progression. We were kind of driven by laws, things that
Okay.
were popping up nationally. We built a small tip line tool when Texas did David's Law. We focused on different aspects, different states were requiring different things. And we were moving, so did a rostering first as we became more
Mm.
involved with I Love You Guys Foundation and started to really embrace their foundational protocols. So at that point in time, we started out alerting, messaging, basic plan on the device, the contact list, those core pieces. Moved on to rostering students so that in a fire drill or in a lockdown, we were able to communicate electronically, speeding up that process of accounting for students. And that took us naturally into when I Love You Guys Foundation released their reunification process. We went right after that and built a reunification tool. And that process continued for, multiple years as they continue to refine. We get better software tools to build. Sometimes you're limited by what technology you have in your toolkit.
Mm.
When that new toolkit comes out, you're able to do things better, faster, more efficiently, and the user interface gets better, all that. So, went right through that process and did reunification. And like you said, it's often those types of things that drive what we develop and when. It's either laws or customers' requirements, or we get the opportunity every once in a while to have new tools that allow us to do some breakthrough things that people didn't ask for, but we think that once we show them those tools, that they'll really embrace it. And give you an example. First of all, they asked that we have a mobile device on iOS and Android. Then people asked for, well, can you put it on my computer and my Mac and my Chromebook? Then comes up, can we have this on our watch? And they actually said, hey, can we not have it on any of our devices and just get it by email or SMS? So you can see that transition of how you have to adapt based upon what you have and also the tools that you get that are made available to you to be able to do things and do them safely and securely. And so on top of all of this, we saw a tremendous amount of cybersecurity changes from the time we started to now. So now everything you do is the most important underlying piece is, can you make this software safe and secure and stable that it stays up 100% of the time, so that people can be safe no matter what day, what time, etc. No downtime.
Yeah, for what, the last 6 years or so, we're at the 99.999% uptime.
One more 9 after that.
Is it? It was the five nines. It was 99.999, or is it even more than that?
999s.
Yeah, not quite 9 nines, but
Yeah,
we have
it's a lot. It's like more than anyone else that I've seen publicly post, anyways. But yeah, it's crazy.
That's really important.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and then like the cyber stuff's like always evolving. Like every day, the bad guys are always improving just as fast. So it's like you got to keep up.
Well, and sometimes it's the incidents that we see that drive the evolution of safety products, and it's I've said this before, is that one of the problems, and I don't think we have it, at least we are nowhere near as bad at this as some of our competitors are. But one of the problems with the industry is somebody says, ask a question, or there's a question out there, and I can solve that. Whatever that is, I can solve that. And so then all of a sudden they see an incident that requires a specific solution, so to speak. I'm using air quotes there. And they come out and they create this solution, and it addresses one thing of the emergency, where it doesn't really prevent it from happening. It may be all in response to, or it really doesn't communicate well with your first responders and so forth. But when we start looking at where we have gone, is taking that and really looking at how do we develop this product that can integrate with other solutions so that we can bring them together. And in some cases, we integrate, and in many more cases now, we integrate with some of our competitors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the problems is there's a mandate, right? You have to have, in many states, not every state, obviously, but there's a mandate. And so you meet that mandate for that specific state, but there's not a single solution out there that meets that mandate. So what that does is now it requires law enforcement and fire departments to manage the data coming in from these mandates and these different vendors and so forth. So looking at that and being forward thinkers that we have, that understand what that means, is now we're looking at products that can integrate with competitors, and we can manage those, and we can notify the schools and organizations and so forth. And it's been incredible that we have conversations with our customers. We have conversations with experts in the field, right? So emergency managers, first responders, district superintendents, and organizations like that. And we figure it out to the point where, from my perspective, there's very few people that can touch us in the technology side of things.
Yeah, I mean, we're over 100 integrations.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, which is, and it's funny because like when I first started, what was 3.5-ish years, it was like we're at like 60 something, like high 60s, I think. And it's like I feel like it's just like it's just like increasing exponentially. It's like within the next week, it's like, oh, we're at this number, and it's I see all the different integrations pouring in. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, but you have to do that because it's part of the DNA. Is let's make it work first, then we'll worry about how we capitalize on that, right? Yep. And let's try to make it work first, and then we'll figure out the rest. And I think we're right there where we need to be, and I think there's good things for the future.
I don't know if I want to talk about future just yet, but
I know.
Getting ahead of me, Kelly.
Okay, I'll take it back.
Yeah, reel it back in. So let's see. And then maybe do any of you remember when we implemented the safety intervention manager? So I'm trying to cover like all the phases.
Yes. Certainly we saw some states adopt laws around having safety threat assessment teams within that state. So as this requirement to have a multi-faceted threat assessment team of law enforcement and a psychologist and specified roles and responsibilities sitting around the table to talk about children that were on that pathway to violence. When that happened, then obviously we could tell there was going to need to be a tool to manage that data. It's extremely sensitive data, so very securely, which didn't get accessed by other people outside of those threat assessment teams. Just was a really important tool, a really high risk tool if you didn't build it right, or the organization that could no longer really use like a Google Doc or something else like that couldn't be safe and secure enough. That was certainly on our pathway after we developed the tip line, that those threats that are coming in needed a place to go immediately when there was high risk. And as we worked with Kelly, we identified what is the important pieces of this process that we need to be good at and make sure schools are able to make those decisions quickly. As we move past that, then it became a piece of, and how easily can we make that process for that school district? Because these people that are on these teams, it's one of the things about school safety is there's a lot of turnover on the staff.
Mm.
So with a lot of turnover, not only do you have to have good tools that people can learn to use, but they have to be good and easy enough to learn quickly because the staffing is always changing.
Yep.
And so that's been a key part. So PIP line led to threat assessment and allowed us to move in that direction. And that pretty much, and we don't talk about some of the things in preparedness like site assessments, emergency operations plans. Those came very early in the toolset that we built, but we sometimes overlook those because the planning and preparation side is often not focused on in any of the legislation anymore. It's kind of put in the rearview window.
Yeah, it's a lot of response heavy kind of stuff for sure. So basically I think maybe the one after that might have been, and this is when I was here when we first came out with the visitor management of Gatekeeper. So now once we did Gatekeeper, we kind of basically covered all 4 phases in a way, which is pretty cool. That we can say like, hey, we really cover it all. So I guess my question, and you can answer if you want, is, was that always the plan? Was your plan always that, hey, my goal is I want to have CrisisGo cover all 4 phases?
We always wanted to be a platform.
Okay.
We never wanted to just build a single tool. We always built from the very beginning. And from the very beginning, we built on AWS. So we didn't start native. We are always in the cloud. We always wanted to have a modern solution, and we always wanted to build the entire platform for safety. We started with strictly school safety because as a young company, you have to really focus on what you're doing. And schools had this duty of care that was more elevated as they had your children that they were going to be taken care of. So we felt very good about being an expert at that because we believe that after you are able to take care of them, if you decide to sell to anybody else or to provide services to other markets, you're going to be very good at it when you can keep kids safe.
Yeah.
It's a good testament to keeping adults safe.
Yeah, because adults typically can probably make better decisions a little bit more quickly than a kid. So if we can keep the most vulnerable safe, then we theoretically should keeping adults safe should be easier.
A little easier.
A little easier.
So
maybe Kelly disagrees. I don't know.
You would think, but it's not.
I knew that was coming.
Our first foray, or dipping the toe into the water of visitor management, actually came during COVID, when we had Safety iPass, which was during those first initial phases of COVID. Schools were trying to figure out, do we go remote? How do we keep the kids safe? How do we isolate the kids that are healthy from those who are not, and so forth? So we put together a system that really allowed us to ask questions, really, and certify that your kid's safe. No temperature, no exposures, those types of things, so that you could be as confident as possible that those kids that are in school aren't going to infect the rest of the school. And so when we started talking about visitor management after the return to school and so forth, then we look at, well, that Safety iPass and allowing those people who can go to school into school kind of set the, maybe not necessarily the platform's the same, but it's certainly the mentality or the processes are, because what you're trying to do is make sure the right people are in school and that the people who don't have a need or an interest or shouldn't be in schools aren't. So kind of the same concept. So we had a little bit of background during that time of COVID. So that helped the company, I think, work through that quicker when we got there.
Yes, agreed.
That's right. That was another instance of being able to innovate quickly during that whole COVID mess.
And we pivoted pretty quickly on that one, as I remember. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, there's a lot of companies that were doing they were like, they would create one thing, but then during COVID, they switched and they were like making masks, like just like that. It was
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Well, that's what it was for us too. It was a time of,
But
if you didn't
because,
change, you were going to be left doing nothing.
yeah, because I mean, we were stuck with a product for school safety when schools were shutting down,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's
So
kind of a problem.
we needed to figure a way around that, and we were able to. So that was a fun time.
Yeah.
We moved through that pretty quick.
Man, let's see. Now that we've almost covered all of the things, except for one. I'm leaving kind of towards the end a little bit. So one of my questions for you, Jim, is, so out of all the things that you've created, minus the last thing that we've made, what has been like your like, oh man, this is like my favorite thing ever. This is so cool. This is awesome. Like what product or feature has like been like one of your favorites, I guess, is I'll put it that way.
That's really hard because my last thing is always my most favorite thing. It's just the
Okay.
way it is for me. But tell you the truth, the thing that I'm most proud of what we built is our communication engine.
Okay.
Not one single thing, but the way that we've been able to take every device type and every messaging channel and aggregate that to clear and concise messaging, not only to the people in the building, but through escalation to the district office, and to have that core underlying message group that no matter what we connect to, whether it's connecting to a video camera system or an access control system or even a shot detection system, right? Everything rides on that communication system. And the foundation of that has allowed us to grow and to differentiate. It's so important, communication within the buildings, that it's often forgotten because we focus on alerting, but we have so many school districts that use just our messaging every day with all of their safety leaders across the campus, from one school to hundreds of schools, where they're using a safety team account, a message group, to share information all the time. Came from working with a really large school district on the East Coast. And the superintendent said, I never want to go to another press conference where something's going on at a school and I don't know about it. So his teams from every building within that district put in, hey, I've got a kid that's got to go to the hospital. You'll see an ambulance in our building in the next 5 minutes. I have a situation where we had a fire in the trash can in the bathroom, but it's not a real fire, but fire is on their way. And that superintendent drove that so that he could be aware. But we looked at that and we said, that's what every school needs. They need to have their leadership aware, because the minute they're aware, they can take action. And sometimes it's not by the press of an alert, because the staff doesn't know yet necessarily if this needs to escalate, but maybe 2 or 3 things are going on that are minor, that the superintendent or the safety director can look at those messages along with just what came in. And they now know this isn't small. Let's press the button and take the right action to protect everybody. So I'm most proud of that, because we think in the end that will be, communication is really the key to success in all types of school, as well as regular safety.
I mean, it's pretty interesting that you say that's the thing you're most proud of, and that's like the thing that just exists within basically every one of our products. And then Kelly's on here, he's always saying, what is always the first thing to like fail during an incident, or like what's always the one thing that people say that they could have done better or whatever, and it's always communication. So it's really interesting to me that that's like our core thing that like exists everywhere,
right? And it's not just having the data, right? It's not just having the words go from here to there. It's having the right words go and getting the information that you need. We talk about this quite a bit, and when you built when you build a platform that it's centered on communications, fundamentally, foundationally on communication, everything else flows so much better, as opposed to, oh, here's an image of something, or here's a press of a button, or here's this. Because one of my mantras, and I know that this has gotten some traction here at CrisisGo, is what happens next? What happens? Where does that data go? Where does those communications go? Are they going to the right people? Or do the right people have access to that information? And how do we get it there as quickly as possible? How do we make sure that we're getting the right information to the right people? And if you understand that and you build your platform with that in mind, you're so much more likely to get it right. Communication's always going to be a struggle. But the more that we can make sure that communication, that data is painting the right picture for the right people and they have access to it, because part of the problem is cops talk like cops, teachers talk like teachers, fire guys talk like fire guys. But if you have a data set that is there, the same facts are there. And now I can look at that and say, this is how it impacts me. And from my perspective, this is what it means to me. And this is how I'm going to use that data set. Because we've built this foundation, everything else that we build today and in the future is set off of that. So now we're looking at, okay, how do we get that there? And it's coming out in those new products. And I think that's one of the big things that separate us from everybody else.
All right. So the next question is a little bit leaning more towards future. So we've been talking about school safety, and Jim, you kind of mentioned earlier how, we were kind of working somewhat in a niche of K-12. And then if we can protect people, if we can protect kids, then we can protect adults. So lately what we've been talking about, maybe for the last under a year-ish, at least company-wide, is the newer solution called CrisisGo Connect. So how did that come about? What conversations were occurring where we said, you know what, we need to start thinking community safety as opposed to just school safety?
Well, if you want to know when it started about the time Kelly started with us, because he drew on a piece of paper this visual diagram of how CrisisGo could be used for community-wide safety. And from his background, he had a very clear picture in his mind. While we weren't ready to move there at that time, we still had to build out the platform for schools, and we had this need to foundationally be better and stronger than where we were. Also, over that 5 years, more and more states picked up Alyssa's law and required that Alyssa's law have the alerts go directly to the first responding agency. So all of a sudden there was pressure on schools to connect to their agencies as part of a fulfillment, either for a grant or through an audit by the state of if they were complying. So this started to bridge that gap. Now, almost all of our school districts have some form of communication with their first responding agency, whether it's an SRO in their building, or it might be that they know the chief of police and they can call them up and ask for help. But really, there was no tool set that helped schools communicate more effectively with first responding agencies in a broader context of maybe community safety. And as we went through it, Kelly and I were having this conversation. He always said that the school is the incident commander for the first 1 to 3 minutes. They have the alert telling people, the incident commander at that building is giving directions, move these kids to safety, the alarms are going off, we're teaching teachers how to account for students. All this stuff now is actually taking place at the school district, inside that building. Much better than the past years, 12 years ago when we started. And teachers and staff are starting to take the responsibility of what they do, but we siloed that. We built that, and they were doing it, but their first responding agencies had no idea of all the steps they're taking, and they did not have any access to see what had happened from the start of the alert or the start of the risk to where it was at when they actually were invited to join the response team. Kelly, you might want to expand on that based upon your thoughts, because we did this all together.
Yeah, it's what's next, right? So if you take Alyssa's law, and the intent of Alyssa's law is it's really to get law enforcement there as quickly as possible to the right location, understanding what the issues are, where they're happening, so that they can help the school through this tragedy as quickly as possible. But when you think about the management of that case or that instance, we really have schools kind of in this no man's zone. They're trying to figure out how to do these things when they don't have the experience, they don't have the expertise, and in many cases, their skill sets are low level or mid level at best. And so they're pressing a button, and they're thinking, okay, somebody's going to come save us. But you have this 1 to 3 minutes, sometimes up to 8-10 minutes, that you have nobody there. So you need to get your stuff started. You need to get things going in that time frame. And then you have to be able to transfer all of that information to those responders and give them your current status, where you're at in this, what have we done, where are we at? And we have to be able to transfer that very quickly. Opening up all of that information to them is critical. And we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but you get back to if we can keep our kids safe, we can keep other organizations safe in the community. And how does that play into this? If you build it correctly for the worst case scenario, then the other scenarios are going to come into play, and we're going to have a safer community, because it's my feeling that not only does this open up the communication channel, it almost, in my view, it almost forces the relationships that are required before an incident occurs, because you have to sit down and talk about it. Have a cup of coffee with your first responders and say, okay, we're going to start connecting. We're going to have all of this stuff together. What does that mean? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What are they, the pretty guys with the fire hoses, what are they going to do? And how are we going to get our kids to the hospital? How are we going to account for them? How are we going to do all of this stuff? And it starts forcing those kinds of conversations, which in general, because it's going to create better relationships. Better relationships mean better, more effective, more efficient responses.
I mean, that was pretty good. I'm gonna have Calvin keep that one. Keep that as a quote. No.
Good, because I'm not going to remember I said it in 10 minutes.
Oh, I know. Yes, I mean, this really helps us kind of like group together or include the entire communities. Now this helps us expand even beyond schools. It's really, you can add anyone to this essentially, and that's kind of what it's all about, is protecting everybody. And so I think where Connect's going is really going to be pretty influential in community safety for sure. Let's see. So I guess question, if Jim wants to answer or not, I don't know if he wants to keep it secret or not. But and as Kelly said, I'll rephrase it, of what's next for CrisisGo.
So yeah, maybe just this being tucked in there somewhere, we really need to figure out community-wise who's responsible for community safety, because this is a challenge. The schools think they're only responsible for school safety. Law enforcement thinks they're responsible for safety, but When you say an emergency happens, who's responsible to let everybody know? And we are looking at communities and we're asking that question. When an alert goes off at a local school district, a public school district, how are the private and parochial schools hearing about it? Because they could be right next door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their kids could be at dismissal time walking into an event. How do the public schools hear about it when a parochial school or there's a bank robbery down the street? Who's responsible for notifying people ahead of time and making sure that everybody is notified and can take the right protective actions? This is the key problem that we see. And we have to do this understanding that nobody has any more time in their organization. Nobody has any more money.
Yeah. Those are the two things.
Right. So we have to, this is where technology is really great. Technology can provide efficiencies that can allow you to add these things into your existing systems so that you can do this near automatically and allow you to be accurate and make sure everybody's informed and can stay connected together as a community to respond accordingly. Not add more on 911, not add more on the school staff and the school buildings to make sure that they include these people and different people within their groups and have all sorts of special emails going out or notifications going out that that person might not even be there the next year. What is the system approach to solving this problem that everybody knows and everybody can tell if they have a risk, knows if there's a risk out there, can tell if they have a risk so that others are warned? Now we start to build that fence, that mesh of a connected community where there are no gaps that we can see, and we're working to protect each other. So I don't know where we might fit that in or anything, but it's one of the things I think is important to me.
Yeah, and it's identifying those organizations that exist outside of the school setting or that are semi-connected to the school settings, like after-school programs, recreational programs, sports programs, youth organizations, those types of things, and start connecting those dots to how we keep our kids safe, right? I think the initial focus is how do we keep our kids safe? How do we do that? And when we start expanding our thought process to include those kids and their activities outside of the school, then we start connecting other organizations. Then we start looking at, oh, well, we could do this and that. And then we take huge steps into protecting not only the schools, but the community itself. And because there's so much that happens outside of the school environment that have safety concerns, right? And so now we have to figure out how we're going to go through that. And I think we're in a good position to figure that out.
All right. So we've built Connect, and so then the hot topic over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 years around every company is AI. So I think maybe everyone's wondering how much of AI are we going to indulge in?
It's a good question.
I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah, glad I thought of it.
We are, because where do we go from here with CrisisGo? As a platform, we have access for our organizations that use CrisisGo. We have access to data that can help them all during, before, and after any type of incident. And that's because we have that data formatted in a way that AI can take a look at this data and help them, not replace them, but help them in their decision-making process through an event, prior to it, just through normal messaging that's happening every day. They can start to identify and deal with risks with an assistant helping them achieve that goal. The other thing is that we will become an AI company at our core. because there's nothing that is static in the software business. If you're going to be taking advantage of the best tools to make your onboarding faster, your management of your system easier and more effective, reducing the number of people, the number of touches people have to put in to keep your system up and running daily, you're not going to be able to compete in this market. We've already been deploying AI tools throughout our development team to help us to achieve these goals, and starting to build small tools that our customers can use, and even stronger and bigger tools that we can help surface data for our customers so that they can be better. I'm sure as we go through the next many years that you're going to see other tools required by schools, some of which we're building, like Hall Pass and event management and those types of things that can be developed quickly and easily using these AI tools to help us develop. And so you'll be able to see software coming to market quickly, just filling in the small little gaps that schools have that they want to now take into consideration.
I think we're also going to see it on the training side of things. AI helping with the training, right? Because it's difficult. One of the things that we have a difficult time providing is experience. And I think that when we're doing training and so forth, we can add experience, although it's not as good as experiencing the real incident, which we don't want people to have to do. But there's ways that we can produce training scenarios, produce analysis and evaluations of what they're doing, and say, you might want to do this, and those types of things. So I think AI is going to be big there. AI scares me. And in fact, I wrestled with it all weekend, and it won the first bout. But we're gonna try to conquer it in the near future. So, or at least tame it a little bit, because it's sitting there laughing at me right now.
I just can't wait for the the AI Kelly, where I can just be like, "Hey Kelly, what do I do?" And it's just like a little hologram, like Kelly over my shoulder.
Yeah.
Do this.
It might get a little annoying after too long, but right.
Yeah, I need an off button somewhere for sure.
Right, but it's there. I mean, we're seeing it, and here's what I will caution people. I guess AI is a tool, and there's different aspects of it that are useful and different aspects that are harmful, and you need to be aware of both. Right. And if you have something that is similar to AI, people are going to use it for nefarious reasons and stuff. We're going to use it. We're going to use it for the good stuff. We're going to try to make your lives easier with it. Don't be afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it, but right now we're on this love-hate relationship status. But you have to protect your schools from, we're seeing more and more of this AI as a threat. The potential is we're going to see, well, let me just use this phrase. We're going to discriminate against AI. We're going to start seeing so many bad things from it because there's so many bad people in the world that we're going to start discriminating against AI when it can help you and when it's beneficial to you and how it can keep you safe. We just have to make sure that we understand the good and the bad of it. That'll be a challenge for us, but I'm confident that we can work through that sooner than later.
It's going to snowball, but like in a good way. It's going to be just, it's AI is just like, the limit is whatever your creativity and whatever your imagination is. And then even beyond that, what I found is like, we'll give AI like a thing like, okay, here's what I want to do. What if it could do this, blah, 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 blah. And it goes, and then like gives me something. And I'm like, wow, that's like actually really good. And then I'm like, can you think of something else? Like, how do I even make this even better? And it goes, gives me all these like options. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. That's crazy. Yeah. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. But it's in that same phase that we were at 10 years ago, where none of the platforms are connected. Some of them are starting to connect other platforms. So
that's true.
And it's not as mature as it should be. I talk to people who like AI and they say, oh, just do this. I try and they go, oh, you're using the wrong platform. Well, and you just sit there and you go, well, that doesn't help me. So there's going to be a transition for all of us. Yeah, I think we're poised to do well with it, and I'm excited about where we're headed with this. And as we're talking about this, I've been writing notes down and saying, oh, I need to talk to Jim about this.
No.
It'll be okay because we're going to be together in Sacramento this week and Illinois next week. So we'll have plenty of time.
Good luck to you, Jim.
I do want to thank you guys for having me on, particularly for the 100th. This is amazing. And I do want to say that, even though it's been a lot of we and I, and this is about a team of people that we have in CrisisGo that have dedicated their lives to keeping kids safer and to helping school districts be better at this. We certainly want to share all of the progress that we made with them, as they were the ones talking to schools, are the ones that help fight for schools to have better tools and to solve problems from a parochial charter school to the largest school districts in the United States with different needs, different wants, and different budgets, and try to make all that happen. So we're really proud of those people, you guys and the others that have dedicated yourselves to achieving these goals.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to work in this industry without having the passion for it, right? And I think that's one of the differentiators for us as a company. We have a lot of passionate people who talk to a lot of passionate people as our customers, as friends and family and acquaintances that, when they find out, oh, you're doing that. And all of a sudden well, hey, maybe we could do this. And have you ever thought about this? And have these kind of discussions with that community as a whole. So I appreciate the support that we've gotten from all of those that work here and all of those that work in school safety and the networking and stuff that's occurred over the years that I've been here. But it's been fantastic. So awesome. Thanks, Ethan, for being my co-host.
Hey, someone had to do it. So
100 times.
Of course, I was one.
A little brutal. He said it 100 times.
It was funny.
It's your fault.
This all came about because I kept having conversations with Kelly, and then I was like, you know what? I feel like I can't be the only person that needs to learn this information, and I'm like, what better way to? I want to have people suffer the abuse that I've suffered. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
But yeah, it just made sense, having a podcast and having a way for someone to digest that information. So glad that it's still been a thing, and we're on episode 100, and hopefully we get to 200. We'll see.
Yeah.
See if I can stand listening to Kelly for that long. I don't know.
Likewise.
Man.
Awesome.
All
right. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at CrisisGo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.